9 million downloads. 9 million, all potentially compromised.
Wow.
That's the scale of the cybersecurity incident we're diving into today. 2 popular Visual Studio Code extensions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a wake-up call for developers everywhere.
Big time. And these extensions, right, they were designed to customize the coding environment.
Make it look all nice and pretty.
Yeah. And they reached a massive audience. 9 million, that's a huge number.
Huge.
And, when you think about it, themes are typically static, right?
Yeah.
They shouldn't be executing code.
Right.
So when researchers discovered suspicious activity within these extensions code, it was a huge red flag.
Especially, you said, obfuscated JavaScript.
Especially obfuscated JavaScript, yeah.
That's really concerning. It's almost like finding a hidden engine in what you thought was just a fancy paint job for your car.
Yeah.
You don't expect that.
No, you don't. Yeah.
So what exactly did the researchers uncover that triggered these alarm bells? Well, they found evidence of code execution within these extensions, which is highly unusual, right?
For a theme.
For a theme, exactly.
Yeah.
And to make matters worse, they used these obfuscation techniques, which made it even harder to analyze the code and figure out what it was doing.
Right.
So that just immediately raises suspicion about potential malicious activity.
And this wasn't just some theoretical vulnerability, right?
Right.
Millions of developers actually had these extensions installed.
Millions.
What kind of real-world risks were they potentially exposed to?
That's the big question.
Yeah.
While we don't have concrete evidence of widespread exploitation, having executable code in a place it shouldn't be opens the door to a whole range of attack vectors.
So things like data theft, unauthorized access, even the possibility of malware being injected into projects.
Potentially, yeah.
That's pretty serious.
It is.
Now, the developer of these extensions did offer an explanation, claiming it was all due to an outdated dependency. How much weight does that explanation hold from a cybersecurity perspective?
It's a common defense, for sure.
Right.
And to be fair, outdated dependencies can introduce vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
But in this case, it doesn't fully explain the heavy obfuscation that was used.
Right.
And if you look at the developer's subsequent actions, they released a supposedly clean version, but even that was flagged. So that raises even more questions about, their transparency and intent.
So we're left with this lingering uncertainty. Was this a case of negligence?
Yeah.
A compromised dependency?
Possibly.
Or something more intentionally malicious?
That's the difficult part about cybersecurity incidents. They're often shrouded in ambiguity. It's tough to definitively prove intent.
Right.
But the red flags are there. The obfuscation, the unusual code execution, the developer's response, all of it.
It definitely warrants further investigation.
Absolutely.
And for the millions of developers who might have been impacted by this incident serves as a pretty harsh reminder that even seemingly benign tools can harbor hidden risks.
Absolutely. This situation underscores the importance of having a multi-layered security approach. And, I can't stress this enough, having robust backup and disaster recovery strategies in place is paramount.
So even if a developer's machine is compromised through something like this, having an air-gapped and immutable backup could be a lifesaver.
It could be, yeah.
Let's break that down for our listeners who might not be familiar with those terms. Why are air-gapped and immutable backups so crucial in this scenario?
Sure. So an air-gapped backup is basically an isolated copy of your data.
Okay.
It's completely disconnected from your network and any online threats.
So it can't be accessed remotely?
No. Think of it like having a spare key hidden outside your house.
Right.
Safe from anyone trying to break in.
Got it.
And then immutable backups, well, they're tamper-proof. Once the data is written to them, it can't be modified or deleted, even by administrators.
So even if an attacker manages to get in, your most critical code and projects, they remain safe.
They do.
And recoverable.
Yes.
It's like having an insurance policy for your digital assets.
Precisely. And in today's world where, everything's interconnected and even trusted tools can potentially turn into threats, having this kind of robust backup and disaster recovery plan is essential.
Essential.
And no longer optional.
And speaking of essential backup solutions, there's one vendor that stands out in this space for their expertise in air-gapped and immutable backups, and that's Stonefly.
They're great. They offer a range of reliable solutions designed to give you that peace of mind, especially in these kind of situations.
Exactly. If any of our listeners want to explore how Stonefly can help bolster their data protection, you can reach them at sales@stonefly.com. But for now, let's dig deeper into the technical specifics of this incident. What exactly is code obfuscation, and why is it such a red flag, especially in the world of open source software?
So welcome back to our deep dive. In the previous segment, we talked about the discovery of this obfuscated JavaScript code in these, widely used VS Code extensions.
Right, and for a lot of developers listening, the term obfuscation might be new. So let's unpack that a bit. What exactly is code obfuscation, and why was it such a red flag in this case?
Okay, so imagine you're trying to read a technical manual, right? But all the labels and instructions have been replaced with, like, random characters and symbols. That's kind of what code obfuscation does. It transforms code that's normally readable into this jumbled mess.
It's like a secret code.
Exactly, secret code. And it makes it really hard for humans and even some automated tools to understand what the code is actually doing.
So it's like turning a clear blueprint into a puzzle with no guide.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
But why would anyone go through the effort of doing this, especially in the open source world where transparency is usually valued?
Yeah. Well, there can be legitimate reasons, like protecting intellectual property or making the code smaller. But in this case, the level of obfuscation was unusually heavy.
Yeah, you said that before.
Yeah, and that makes it hard to rule out malicious intent.
And the fact that this code was found in extensions that were mainly about visual themes, that makes it even more suspicious, right?
Absolutely. I mean, themes are usually static, meaning they're not supposed to be executing code. So finding obfuscated JavaScript in them, that really suggests something more is going on.
It's like finding a complex electronic circuit hidden inside a decorative picture frame.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head.
So let's get a bit more technical. What are some of the techniques used to actually scramble code?
Well, one common technique is renaming variables and functions.
Okay.
So instead of seeing a variable named user password, you might see something like XYZ789.
So it's like trying to have a conversation where everyone's using code names.
Exactly. And another technique is called code minification. That removes all unnecessary characters and spaces.
So it makes the code smaller.
Right, but also harder to read.
It's like condensing a detailed instruction manual down to a single dense paragraph.
Yeah, you lose all the clarity. And then there are even more sophisticated techniques, like control flow obfuscation, which rearranges the order of code execution.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's like reading a book where the chapters are all jumbled up.
That sounds like a nightmare to try and understand.
It can be. Even with the right tools and expertise, analyzing heavily obfuscated code is a huge challenge.
So in this case, the obfuscated code, it really served as a major red flag.
It did. It raised serious concerns about, potential backdoors, hidden functionality, or even the ability to download and run other malicious code.
This incident really highlights that balance between protecting code and being transparent, especially in the open source community.
It does.
So how can developers navigate this complexity without sacrificing security?
Well, developers need to carefully consider how much obfuscation they use, especially if they're sharing their code publicly. If they do need to use it, they should provide clear documentation and explain why they're using it.
So others can understand it.
Right.
And this brings us to a bigger point, supply chain security.
Yes.
This incident shows how a seemingly small component, like an extension, can impact the security of an entire development environment.
It's true.
It's that weakest link analogy.
Absolutely.
You can have the strongest chain in the world, but if just one link is weak, the whole thing can break.
That's right. And this vulnerability, it goes beyond just the technical stuff.
Meaning?
It can damage reputations and erode trust within the developer community.
So what can developers do to mitigate these risks and avoid using malicious code in their projects without realizing it?
Well, they need to be more careful about where they get their third-party libraries and components from.
Okay, so don't just grab the first thing they find online.
Right. Do some research, check reputations, look for signs of active maintenance and security updates.
Due diligence is key.
It is.
It's like checking the credentials of a contractor before you hire them.
Exactly. And they also need to implement strong code analysis and review processes,
Which means?
using tools to identify potential vulnerabilities, both in their own code and in any third-party components.
So having multiple checks in place.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that security isn't a one-time thing.
Right.
It's an ongoing process. Developers need to stay informed about new threats, update their dependencies regularly, and be proactive about addressing any security concerns.
So this VS Code incident, It's really a wake-up call
It is.
for developers to prioritize security at every stage.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that even seemingly minor components can have a big impact on security, and that being vigilant, taking proactive measures, and having a multi-layered approach are essential in today's world.
We've talked about backups and disaster recovery as part of a solid security strategy, but let's dig a little deeper. What specific types of backups are best for mitigating these risks?
So, in situations like this, where there might be malicious code lurking in your system, air-gapped and immutable backups are really important.
Okay.
Think of an air-gapped backup like a vault that's completely separate from your network.
Unreachable.
Yes, unreachable. It's like storing a master copy of your important documents offline in a safe place.
So even if an attacker gets in and messes things up, you've got that clean backup.
Right. And immutable backups, those add another layer of protection because they can't be tampered with. Once the data is written, it can't be modified or deleted.
Not even by administrators.
Nope. This is especially helpful against ransomware attacks.
Okay, so it's like having a backup that's not just secure, but also tamper-proof.
Exactly. And if you're looking for a good provider of these types of backups, I recommend Stonefly.
Yeah, Stonefly is great.
They have a lot of options that are perfect for protecting against these kinds of threats.
For those listening who want to improve their data protection with these backup solutions, you can contact Stonefly at sales@stonefly.com. And now let's move on to the next segment where we'll talk about more security measures that developers can use. So we've spent a lot of time breaking down this security incident, talking about obfuscation, and really hitting home the importance of backups and disaster recovery.
Right.
Now, I think it's time to empower our listeners.
Yeah.
What can developers actually do to protect themselves from these kinds of threats?
Yeah, let's shift from analysis to action.
Action, yeah.
And I think a good starting point is secure coding practices.
So baking security into the code from the very beginning.
Exactly. Developers need to be able to spot and fix common security vulnerabilities as they write code. Things like, SQL injection, cross-site scripting.
Oh, yeah, those are nasty.
Yeah, buffer overflows. Those are all classic attack vectors.
And if they're not dealt with, they can really be exploited.
Oh, for sure.
It's almost like self-defense for code, right? Anticipating and neutralizing attacks before they can do any damage.
Exactly. And the good thing is there are tons of resources out there to help developers learn these skills.
Like what?
Organizations like OWASP, the Open Web Application Security Project.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of them.
They have great guides, training materials, even interactive challenges.
Cool. So really, there's no excuse for writing insecure code these days.
Not really, no.
The information, the tools are all out there?
It's all about making security a priority from the start.
Absolutely. And going beyond individual coding practices, we have to talk about dependency management again.
Yes, absolutely. This incident really showed how one bad dependency can just open up a project to all sorts of vulnerabilities.
It's that weakest link idea, right?
Exactly.
One weak link can break the whole chain.
So first, they got to be really picky about the third-party libraries and components they use.
Don't just blindly trust anything you find online.
Right. Do your research.
Look into their reputation.
Scrutinize the code.
Look for red flags.
Make sure it's actively maintained and updated.
Due diligence, like we talked about.
Exactly. And once you've chosen a dependency, stay on top of security patches and updates.
Because those updates often have crucial fixes.
Yeah, they address those newly discovered vulnerabilities.
It's not just about new features. It's about staying ahead of the security game.
Absolutely. And to make this easier, use dependency management tools like NPM or Maven.
Oh, yeah, those are helpful.
They can automate a lot of the work, like checking for updates and installing them. So it's easier to manage those potential security issues.
It's like having a dedicated security team just for your dependencies. Always watching, always patching.
Exactly. Okay, next layer of protection. Code analysis tools.
Oh, yeah, these are good.
These are really powerful for finding vulnerabilities before they can be exploited.
It's like having a security audit built right into your workflow.
Right. Constantly scanning your code for weaknesses. Now, there are two main types: static and dynamic analysis. Static analysis examines your code without running it, looking for patterns that could indicate a security flaw.
So kind of like a code review, but automated.
Yeah. Exactly. And then dynamic analysis, that actually tests your code while it's running, simulating real-world attack scenarios.
It's like putting your code through a tough security boot camp.
Exactly. And by using both static and dynamic analysis, you get a really thorough view of your code's security.
It's that defense in depth strategy again, right?
Right. Multiple layers of security to create a more resilient environment.
And there are good tools out there to help with this.
Oh, tons. Both commercial and open source. SonarQube, Coverity, Snike.
Yeah, lots of options. It's all about choosing the right tools and integrating them into your workflow.
Now, we can't forget about the human element.
Right, the developers themselves.
Security awareness training is crucial.
Yeah, it's not just about having the tools, it's about knowing how to use them effectively.
Exactly. Developers need to understand the security landscape and think like attackers.
Anticipating vulnerabilities and knowing how to deal with them.
Right. This means understanding secure coding practices, knowing about threat modeling, and how to respond to security incidents.
And creating a culture of security awareness within the entire development team.
Absolutely. Make security everyone's responsibility. Encourage open communication.
And make sure that proactive security measures are rewarded.
Yeah, exactly. Make it part of the company culture.
Okay, so to wrap things up, what are the most important things developers can do to protect themselves from these threats?
Number 1, prioritize security from the get-go. Secure coding practices, good dependency management, using code analysis tools.
Build security in from the foundation.
Exactly. Number 2, stay informed, stay vigilant. The cybersecurity world's always changing. Keep learning about new threats and vulnerabilities and address them proactively.
Security is an ongoing process. Always be learning, adapting, and improving.
And finally, create that culture of security awareness within your team. Encourage collaboration, knowledge sharing, and a proactive approach. Make it clear that security is everyone's responsibility.
We've covered a lot today. The technical details, the implications, and the steps developers can take to stay safe.
And before we go, I want to emphasize again how important strong backup and disaster recovery solutions are, especially after what we've been talking about.
Right. A reliable backup strategy, particularly one with air-gapped and immutable backups, can save you from a lot of trouble.
It can. And if you're looking for a good provider, Stonefly has some great options.
Yep, you can reach out to them at sales@stonefly.com to find out more about how they can help you protect your data. Cybersecurity is a shared responsibility. We all have a part to play.
We do.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of cybersecurity. Stay vigilant, stay informed, and keep coding.